All right, this is a review of 8.4 to 8.8, and we are starting with some Pythagorean Theorem questions. So across from your 90 is always your C, and we're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared because it's a right triangle. So the a and the b are the two legs coming out from the 90 degree, which would be the 6 and the 5. We're solving for c. Now, we don't have c, and we don't have to put 6 or 5 in for a or b. It doesn't matter. And so it's going to be 6 squared plus 5 squared, or you could have done 5 squared plus 6 squared. So we have 36 plus 25 equals c squared. So it's 61 equals c squared. Now don't stop there. Clearly that's not 61. If we want to get c by itself, we got to take the square root. And if it's an equation, we got to do the same thing on both sides. So we are going to take the square root, second x squared down here, get that square root button, 61. And it says to the nearest tenth in the direction, so one decimal place, 7.8. Final answer. Number 2. So for this one, here's your A and your B. We're missing one of them, and we have C. So when I go ahead and plug into this equation, I have to put 14 in for C. Now where you put the 13 doesn't matter. Either spot is fine. So I'll put it in for B, but you could put it in for A. And then you're going to go ahead and expand those. And now square rooting is not the next step here because the a squared is not completely isolated. So just like an equation, if it was an a, you're going to subtract and try and isolate that variable. So a squared equals 27. Again, just looking at it, 27, clearly not the right answer. We need to square root here to get it just a. And we are rounding, so just get the decimal form. One decimal place, 5.1, the 9 bumps it up to 5.2. All right, finding the distance between these points. You have two options here. You can identify those 2 points, like these given ones down here, and then use the distance formula. Or you can use the Pythagorean Theorem, make it a triangle and solve for it. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to make a quick little triangle because this side is 1 and this side is 2, and that's nice and easy. So it's 1 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared. I know that c is across from the 90, so that's what I'm solving for. So that's 1 plus 4 equals c squared. 5 equals c squared. Don't forget to square root. And now we're leaving this in simplest radical form. Okay, so we're not going to get a decimal. So we've got square root of 5. We want to try and break that up into perfect squares, but the smallest perfect square we have is 4, and 4 is not going to go into 5. So simplest radical form here is just radical 5. So it doesn't always have to have a coefficient. It's not always going to have a perfect square in it. Number 4. I'm going to make a triangle here. That's my A and my B. I'm solving for C, the length of that line. So this bottom part here is 2. And I'm going up 4, another 4, so this is 8. So 8 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared. So 68 square root. And we've got square root of 68. So I know 4 goes into that. I'm going to try maybe 16 as well. 68 divided by 16. Nope. 68 divided by 36. Nope. Obviously not 25. If you didn't know that 9 doesn't go into it, clearly. So it appears that 4 is the only perfect square I can find that goes into it. So it's going to break up into square root of 4, square root of 17. 17 times 4 gets me 68. And then the 4 reduces then, of course, to a 2. Final answer is 2 radical 17. All right, distance formula. Square root, subtract your x's, squared, subtract your y's, squared. All right, I'm going to go this direction. So x's are 8 and 3. And my y's, negative 1 minus 1. So that's 5 squared. That's negative 2 squared. Now I did see some people having some problems with the negative. They were squaring getting a negative 4. Right, negative 2 squared is negative 2 times negative 2. That's a positive. Any negative squared is a positive. right, so if you put it in your calculator, don't just type in -2 squared because it's going to say -4. If you're going to type the whole thing in, put it in parentheses. Otherwise, just do 2 squared and know that because this was a negative times a negative, it's going to be positive, so don't confuse yourself. So we get 25 plus 4, and that's, of course, 29, and all of this is still underneath the square root. And we're going to look and see, does 4 fit in, does 9 fit in, does 16 fit in? And the answer is no, 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 no. And so this is in simplest radical form. It's done. All right, subtract my x's. I'm going this direction. 4 minus -2 squared plus 4 minus 0. So this goes plus plus. So 6 squared plus 4 squared. So we're going to get 52. And we got to take the square root of 52. We're leaving everything in simplest radical form, so we need to split this into pieces. Again, I know 4 goes into this. You might want to check 16. No good. See, there's a decimal. It doesn't go in perfectly. So 52 divided by 4 is 13. So it's going to split into a 4 and a 13. 4 becomes a 2. 13 doesn't have anything I can split it with. And so that's our final answer. All right, number 7. X is 0 minus -4. Y's -2 minus 2. So this is 4 squared. This is -4 squared. So it is 16 plus 16, so 32. So square root of 32, because again, this square root follows it down. And I know that 4 goes into this, but I also know 16 does. 32 divided by 16 is 2. 16 times 2 is 32. So I can split this into square root of 16 and square root of 2, and that becomes 4 radical 2. And let's say you started with 4. So you split this as square root of 4, square root of 8, and then you thought the final answer was 2 radical 8. Problem is that's not done yet. These are equivalent, but this now can be split into a 4 and a 2 as well. 4 times 2 is 8. This 2 is still out here. So this square root of 4 becomes a 2, gets multiplied with this one to create this 4, and there's your square root. So if you did by 4 instead of 16 here, you would have had to go one extra step. All right, -6 minus 1. -5 minus -8. This goes plus plus, so that's 3. All right, and then 58 looks like there's things that can go into it, but 4 doesn't fit. Neither does 16, neither does 9, 25, 36. None of those perfect squares are going to go in. So this is simplest radical form, and we're all set there. All right, some exponent properties now. So we're multiplying straight across here. That's going to be -8 times 3. That's -24. Okay, when we have a negative coefficient, that's fine. A lot of students start seeing a negative coefficient and thinking they have to fix it. You can have a negative number. You just can't have a negative exponent. So all the p's are getting multiplied, and you're going to have to add it all together. So you have -2 plus 2. Well, that's 0. Plus -3. So I have -3. Got to fix it. This goes to the bottom. And so it's -24 over p. And when it comes to the bottom, it becomes positive. All right, 25 and 50. So -50. The 1's cancel. So we still have x to the 4th. 2 negatives make a positive. That's 10 times 2. That's 20. So these x's will cancel, +4, -4. So I still have this x. And I have a y to the -2. It would go right here, but I'm going to go ahead and just automatically move it down to the bottom and make it positive. I'm all set. 5 times 6 is 30. The m's together, don't forget that's a 1, so m to the 3rd. -1 combines with 3 to make it 2. And we're good. And so that's why we don't try and fix negatives right up front. Sometimes it'll just work itself out. All right, this now is negative 4 raised to the second. Again, if you're going to put it in your calculator and trust the negative part of it, you got to put it in parentheses. Otherwise, just thinking about it, this is negative 4 times negative 4. And negative times a negative is a positive. 16. Comes to the y, that's a 1. You multiply, that's y squared. Comes to the x, you multiply, that's x to the 4th. And if you put the x first instead of the y, that's fine. Traditionally, you do alphabetical, but it's not make or break. It's okay. All right, 6 squared is 36. When I multiply here, I'm going to get a to the negative 8, and I'm also going to get b to the negative 8. So both of those need to go to the bottom. 36 stays. 36 doesn't have a negative exponent. Technically, that 36 has an exponent of positive 1. So these are going to go to the bottom, so it's going to be 36 over a to the positive 8, b to the positive 8. All right, 6 divided by 6, that basically cancels. X doesn't have anywhere to go. It's going to stay right there. We don't need to move it. It doesn't have a negative. And now this is an interesting one. We haven't looked at many of this where we have negatives on the top and the bottom. So what you really want to do is you want to move both of them. So the y to the first comes up top, becomes positive, and the 3 comes to the bottom. So now there's 3 on the bottom. So this cancels this one, and now we have y squared, and nothing left on top. You do need to fill that space with a 1. Okay, 2 over 6. You divide that, and you get a decimal. And we're not going to put decimals in here. We are going to simplify this though, and that's 1/3. So our final answer is going to have a 1 on top and a 3 on the bottom. I won't put the 1 yet because if there's an x or a y, I don't need the 1. Dealing with x's, move your negatives up. So now there are 8 total on the top. So now I don't need that 1. And the y's are just going to cancel each other out here. We're done. All right, 17. We didn't look really at many of these. So a couple things you could do. One is this whole thing is being raised to the negative 2. So maybe let's simplify the inside first, and then we'll go from there. So the 4 times 4, because remember, order of operations says I can do everything inside parentheses before exponents. So I'm not messing anything up here. 4 times 4, that's 16. There's no other n's. And when I put my m's together, that's going to be m 4 negative 3 to the positive 1. So that's getting raised to the negative 2. So everything is going to get it. 16 raised to the negative 2, n raised to the negative 2, m raised to the negative 2. So all of it's going to the bottom. So we're going to have a 1 on top. So it's 16 squared. We're going to have to change that to an actual number. N squared, m squared. So everything comes to the bottom, becomes positive. If you had tried that in your calculator, which you probably did, 16 raised to the negative 2, you would have got a nasty decimal, and that might have confused you. So what you do is you move it to the bottom. It becomes positive, and then 16 squared is a nice number like 256. So our final answer is going to be 1 over 256 n squared m squared. All right, 18. Since both of these have exponents, I think the easiest thing to do is to simplify both of them before you start trying to multiply. So 3 to the third is 27, and this is y to the ninth. 2 to the fourth is 16. Bring the 4 to everything. So y to the fourth, x to the 16. Now you can go ahead and combine, multiply the coefficients. It's 432. Combine your y's, that's 13. And that's the only x, so it's 16. All right, and now the big one's at the bottom. Simplify your top and bottom before you do anything else. So right here, I'm going to multiply. That's m to the negative 8 on top. 3 times 2 is 6. It's the only m. It stays. N's combine. It's negative 2. So this isn't too bad. All I got to do is move this up. It becomes positive. Move this down. It becomes positive. So m to the 8th is here and n to the 2nd is here. And we're all set. Just need to combine on the bottom. 6 is still there. Put those together. And it's m to the 11th. Now we got this negative 1 out here, right? Looks kind of crazy. So let's simplify the entire inside. See what we can get before we deal with that. So at the bottom, we can combine things before we start moving. So we're going to have just a 2 coefficient. we're going to have a to the 6th, and we're going to have b to the 8th. Bring this down. These b's will cancel, so there's 4 on top, 8 on the bottom. So these 4 will cancel 4 of these, which means there's still 4 left on the bottom. The 3 over 2 is not going to change. All right, and I'm going to take this a, I'm going to bring it down. It's going to become positive, so I have a to the 7th. So I'm looking like this right now, and all of that is raised to the negative 1. Okay, so when we're in parentheses like this, even if it's a fraction, everything is going to get the negative 1. So I get technically 3 to the negative 1. I get 2 to the negative 1. I'm going to get a to the negative 7 because I'm multiplying. And I get b to the negative 4. So it's not changing any of these exponents because even the 3 and the 2 actually had an exponent of 1. We just don't write it. It just knocks them to a negative. And all that does is make you have to change it. So really when you see a negative 1 exponent in a fraction, it's just going to flip it because everything's going to have to move. So we got to put the 3 at the bottom to make it positive. It's 3 to the positive 1. 2's got to go to the top, so it's positive. Move this negative 7 up, it's positive. And move the negative 4 up, and it becomes positive. Nothing that difficult on the quiz, but still a good challenge question.